If you are a regular listener to the Sociology show, then you could help with the costs of promoting and hosting the podcast. If you can spare even a small amount, then you can donate on the GoFundMe.com website by searching for The Sociology Show. There is no obligation, of course, and all future downloads will continue to be free. A huge thank you to all those that have already donated. Your kind gesture will help to continue keep the show going and growing. Best wishes and keep enjoying the show.
Hi, you're listening to The Sociology Show, a podcast about absolutely anything to do with the wonderful world of sociology. Whether you're a teacher, a lecturer, a student, or just taking a passing interest, this podcast will look at a range of issues from social class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, crime, education, and anything else that sociology has to offer. My name is Matthew Wilkin, and in each episode I will speak to someone working in the field of sociology and let them explain all about their own interests, their research and their experiences. So put your earphones in, turn the volume up, and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? Hello and welcome to the Sociology Show. The Sociology Show podcast is brought to you in association with Tutor2You, the exam performance specialist for A-level and GCSE sociology students and teachers. So you can visit tutor2you.net/sociology for revision guides, flashcards, revision videos and everything else you need for your A-level or GCSE studies. And so for this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Associate Professor Louise Owusu-Kwarteng. Louise, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for asking me. Hello, everyone.
Do you mind telling us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, Matthew, my name is Louise Owusu-Kwarteng. I am an associate professor in sociology. I also head up I lead the sociology program at the University of Greenwich. And I'm also an undergraduate research director as well. So what I do here is I kind of get students and staff working together on research projects as well. And in terms of my own research specialism, this is around sort of race and education. So specifically looking at the attainment of West African students and also sociological autobiography. So, again, getting students to kind of like write about their own stories, but in a sociological way. And I've done a couple of mine as well. And then, I guess the last area is about ethnicity. So the way in which ethnic groups kind of interact with each other. And, I did a paper on the relationship between Africans and African Caribbean groups. So, that's me in a very, very tiny nutshell.
Excellent. And we'll explore some of those issues, particularly on race and education, a little bit later. Where did sociology start for you, though, Louise? When did you first encounter this subject?
Right. Okay. So this is a very, very long story, so I'll try to keep it as short as I possibly can. But when I was a kid, I was one of those kids who I just couldn't stop asking questions. And, I used to drive my parents around the bend, and I was very curious. And, every time my dad would say, he would say, don't do this, or, this is because of this. And then I'd be just like, but why? And I think that was my inquisitive mind. So I got this nickname of Because Why, or a rocket, because I just couldn't keep still. So I think, for instance, it's funny because on Twitter today, someone was talking about our first political engagements. So I think for me, one of the ones that comes to my mind is when I was 3.5 and it was the winter of discontent, and I was asking why, why there was so much litter on the ground, and because my mum couldn't give me an answer, I was still kept asking why. So I think that was the kind of sociological, looking at things sociologically. And then, I've always liked writing, and then down the line I got to do sociology GCSE when I was 16, and I really, really liked it because it allowed me to kind of explore things that maybe I hadn't done in any other areas. So I remember doing my research project on immigration, and so I interviewed my parents and some other members, because I'm from Nottingham, and we had quite a small Ghanaian community. So I interviewed them and I just said, okay, what brought you here? What was your experiences and everything? I got a really good grade on the project. I got a 90 something for that. So I thought, I actually like this. And then I did A-level, and I moved, long story short, I mean, I had a little bit of a tricky experience in my sixth form. It was a bit racist and stuff. So I just decided, you know what, I can't stay there anymore. So I moved to college. And the college that I went to, it was very interesting because it's on the front page of the Sun newspaper because of how bad it was. But I had a really brilliant sociology teacher. And you know, she really brought it to life because things, for instance, like studying the family, you know, she kind of showed us, I don't know, like for instance, we're looking at the East End, and like, you know, she made us like do an EastEnders, as in, you know, I think it was the Fowler family tree.
Yeah.
You know, so she made us do that and everything just to illustrate, you know, the East End and stuff like that. Lots of, she let me do a project on race and education based on my experience. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a degree in this. And then, like, you know, it just went on from there. And, you know, I think at the end, so I did my master's as well in social policy, but I still couldn't keep away from the sociology. And there were certain things that were really seriously getting on my wick because, you know, I'm from Nottingham, and like when I finished, no, just before I started my master's, you know, the education statistics had come out for Nottingham, and honestly, we were at the bottom of the table.
Yeah.
Some schools were really shambolic. And, you know, I went to go and work at this project where, you know, black kids were getting excluded from school and everything. And I was just like, what's going on? Because these kids are really bright. And, you know, so I did my master's project on those kind of things. And, you know, again, that just kind of like made me think, well, there's something wrong with the way that things are being reported here, because like you're focusing a lot on negative attainment and stuff, whereas these kids that I dealt with were very, very bright. And when you're an advocate between the school and the parents and stuff, again, you could see that there's something dodgy in the system. So, you know, I thought I've got to do my doctorate on this, you know, and like there's a bit of pressure from my dad particularly to go on and continue my education, but I was going to do it anyway. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to write something about positive attainment. So yeah, and then I just kind of started my doctorate in 2005 and then finished in 2010. So I've been teaching it, well, I actually started teaching when I started my PhD and that. And I think the more I taught about it, the more it just made me think, yeah, do you know what, I really like this subject. And, you know, it relates so much to my life, and, you know, it relates a lot to my students' lives. So like when I teach it, I always try to sort of say to them that, look, you know what, put your life experience in here. Put your life experience about what it is that you're talking about. You know, like even if you're writing an essay for me, can you just, you know, like add in a bit of your own autobiography within it and everything? So I try to bring it to life for them. You know, it helps me to understand my own life. So for instance, I'm a black female academic, and there's not that many of us and stuff, but, you know, understanding my own experience within academia and stuff, and the positives and, you know, the issues, how do I bring my sisters up, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah.
I think you win the prize, Louise. I always ask people where sociology started for them. They normally say A level. You said 3.5, so I think you win.
I can live with that. Yeah.
And then I always ask people who their influence were. Is there any particular writers or theories that you're really passionate about?
Actually, I think since I've gotten older and I've just kind of like, you know, developed my interest more, I think there are two people. So I'd say my boss is one of them. So her name is Professor Tracy Reynolds. And I think for me, one of the things that, like one aspect of her work that really got me, and it really kind of like spoke to me when I was doing my PhD, was this thing about social capital. Because like, you know, one of the things that she was saying was that actually we do tend to look at that is favored by sort of like white middle class people, but then also what about the kind of social capital that we as black and minority ethnic groups use in order to kind of progress? And, you know, I thought that was really, really useful because that doesn't get looked at and it doesn't get sort of understood and everything. And I think, you know, even though we don't have that kind of same access to cultural capital and social capital as maybe someone like Boris Johnson or David Cameron or even Dominic Raab has, you know, like what we use what it is that we have in order to progress. And also she's a very nice person, so that always helps. And then the other one that really kind of spoke to me was Professor Gail Leatherby. So, you know, she did a lot of stuff around autobiography, and I'm going to admit to something that I probably shouldn't right now, but I kind of stumbled across her work one day when I was kind of sitting in my library because I was sweating writing my PhD and stuff. But I wanted to kind of add myself in it. And then I found, like, I was just kind of strolling around the bookshelves and stuff, and I found this journal that she had written about using autobiography in her work. And, you know, like it resonated so closely with me. And I kind of borrowed it. And yeah, that was back in 2008. And in 2020, I still have it. But anyway, but yeah, her work was really, really, really kind of like influential. And as a result of that, I've written quite a few autobiographical papers. And, you know, she's a really lovely person because, you know, both of them, both Tracy and Gail, have been mentors to me. So, yeah, I'd say that they're the two most influential people.
Right. Thank you. Should we move into your own work then? So you mentioned race and education is a big part of your research. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll tell you what kind of got me into it. So when I was a sixth former, I was at this school, and it was particularly, I mean, it's seen as one of the best ones in the East Midlands. I won't mention it. And the thing is, there was racism, but I think for me, the predominant thing was classism. So, like, you know, there was a lot of, you know, really rich kids that went there. But anyway, to cut a long story short, like, I'd started my A-levels and stuff. And I think with most of us, you struggle as you transition into it. But, like, you know, I was struggling and everything, and I wasn't doing very well, I'm not going to lie. And I think part of it was me, because I know the way that I work. But then, you know, it was also, I think it was to do with teaching, and it wasn't just me saying this. But anyway, you know, we were having our careers interview and stuff, and then this careers lecturer said to me that, you know, I wasn't going to make it because I'm black, and that I should consider working in a factory, or if I must have a career, I should think about doing nursing, or if I went to university, I should go where they took me on the lowest points. And I'm not going to lie, you know, I was, you know, when you're just steaming, I was steaming that angry. But I thought, you know what, I'm not going to let you see me cry, you know. So I was just like, you know, right, okay. So I went home and I said to my dad, I said, look, you know, this is what's happened and stuff. And I said, you know, my dad he was great, because he just goes, you know what, you can leave that place and come to where I go to where I work. So I was like, yeah, I'm going and stuff. So I left. So it was from there that, you know, like I did my A-level project on similar experiences and stuff. And then the more that I explored it, the more that there were things that were winding me up. I mean, about, you know, people's experiences within the education system, but then also because, you know, like I'd worked in the area with those kids that were getting excluded from school. But then also the thing that was really, really getting on my nerves was the fact that there was always so much emphasis on the fact that kids weren't doing very well, that black kids weren't doing very well. And I was just thinking, well, why are we not hearing the ones that are?
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that Bernard Cohen did that study in 1970, why the West Indian child is made educationally subnormal. I mean, you know, a bit tricky, even that title as it is. But then, you know, like when you read things like that, you're just like, man, you know, the system's a bit, we need some rethinking. But then also, I think we need to hear a different story. So, you know, it was that, you know, my own experience of growing up in a sort of Ghanaian household where, you know, like education was there was just not an option. You had to do well, you know, there was no question about anything. And a lot of, like, you know, my cousins, you know, like my other West African peers, it was always just like drummed into us that you have to do well. And because our parents had kind of like migrated from Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone and whatnot. So it was all of that. So, you know, from there, that's when I just thought, you know what, I'm going to write my doctorate on this. I'm going to write about, you know, positive attainment. And yeah, you know, like I had some people just kind of questioning, well, why are you doing this and stuff like that? You know, we know that the story, and I'm just like, no. So it did feel a little bit like I was a lone wolf, kind of like arguing this. But I think the tide is starting to turn a bit. You know, we're starting to see a little bit more research on positive attainment, but I still think that we've got a very long way to go in terms of challenging the narrative. You know, I'll still keep shouting that because that's what I do, you know. So, yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because I taught sociology in Kenya for 3 years. And one of the issues that many of the students had quite fairly is they looked at the statistics which just said about how black students are performing. And of course, what they said is, well, what do you mean by black? East African, West African, Caribbean? You know, to put all of those figures together seems so reductive.
Yeah, it is. And that's another thing I had a real bug. I got so many bugbears, but that's another one, because I mean, I think even even amongst Africans, there's a difference, for instance, if you look at the statistics between the differences between sort of like West African students' attainment and maybe with some East Africa, there's differences there. But then even within East Africa, there's difference, because Ethiopian students do really well. Do you know what I mean? So, I think we can't, and then also between African and African Caribbeans, there's a difference, but then even within Caribbean groups, there's a difference as well. But people don't break this down. They just kind of just lump us all together. And, this kind of relates to another aspect of my research, where I was just kind of looking at the relationships between black groups, because I think, as you say, it is very reductive. And yes, there are similarities in terms of our cultures, but there are also differences as well. And I think that needs to be recognized a lot more.
Yeah. So why does it persist? Because actually, even if you were to look at the sociology textbooks today, not all of them, but some of them would still have kind of the average of performance showing, Asian students at the top and white and black students lower down and towards the bottom. So why does that narrative persist, do you think?
Okay, can I be very frank?
Yeah, please do.
It's just people are being simplistic, and it's lazy. Because I mean, okay, yes, there's lots and lots of different black groups in the UK and stuff, but I just think that we need to be, if statisticians can kind of make regional differences, social differences, socioeconomic differences, if they can make all of them, why can't they do it in terms of ethnicity? But I just think it's, in some ways, it's the way of kind of maintaining the narrative. And I'm just no, we can't do that. We can't do that. We need to move beyond this, because we're in 2020 now. But I think it's just easier just to do it because it's been like this for generations.
So how do you carry out your research then, Louise? Because I'm interested to know your methodology before we find out your results.
Okay, so I'm very much okay. So with my PhD and papers that have come from that, I've done qualitative interviews. So with my PhD, I interviewed sort of 25 Black British Ghanaians. Some of them came from here. Some of them were born and raised in London. Some of them came from Nottingham, because that's where I grew up. So, I used a snowball method. So I got people, for instance, I like to say gatekeepers, I suppose, who referred me on to other people. So for instance, when I came down to London, I knew some people, but I didn't know all that many. And I couldn't go in the streets and just kind of approach people and say, yo, you Ghanaian, do you want to participate in my research? So, what I did was, in one case, there was a group called Ghana 100, and someone I knew kind of introduced me into that. And then I had to make this speech. It was really embarrassing, but I had to make this speech to try and recruit researchers and participants. So I did it that way. But again, in Nottingham, I had contacts who kind of responded to me. Yeah, who kind of led me on to other people and that. So yeah. And then I did life history interviews. So I just kind of got them to talk about, their childhood, kind of growing up in Nottingham, what, what did their parents say about education and attainment? What did they think? And, how did they respond to it and stuff? How has it had an impact on where they are at the moment? So that's how I did that one.
And can I ask you something about that? Because I'm really interested in identity. So do many British-born students that you spoke to, do they still consider their identity Ghanaian, even if they were British-born?
Some do. I think it also depends on their experience as well, because a lot of the ones I spoke to did say that they were British Ghanaian. Yeah. And it was very interesting because the ones so I did it also by generation, because most of them were Generation X's. Although there was some Generation Ys in there. So all the Generation Ys were we're British Ghanaian. Most of the Generation X's were, so the younger end. So those people that were sort of born in the 70s. But there were some that were born sort of in the 60s who had been fostered out. to white English foster parents, because this is what West African parents used to do, because as a way of juggling their education and their work and their child care. So, like, because they grew up in those English foster homes or Irish foster homes, because they were born in and they were raised in that context, and they didn't have that much access to their, kind of heritage culture, they identified themselves as English. And I was just, I don't judge them, because I think in what they learn in their final formative years often sticks with them. I mean, I met one of them not so long ago, actually, and she was actually saying the same thing. She was just said that, like, I can't see myself as Ghanaian because I didn't have that much heritage connection to the culture, because I didn't grow up with it. Whereas I think a lot of us did. We grew up sort of going, for me, for instance, I grew up going to Ghana school. Like, I grew up here in High Life in my house. I grew up hearing my parents speaking our language and everything, and all of my cousins. So I had that stronger sense of my Ghanaianness. But whereas I think with that generation, not all of them, but a lot of them didn't.
Great, thank you. Sorry, that was just my curiosity. I'm always interested by curiosity of how people identify themselves. And then should we move on to your kind of findings as well then? So what were your main findings from the interviews with the sample?
Okay, so off the top of my head, so I did 25, and all of them had got 5+ GCSEs, like an A to C. Even the one that didn't. There's one that didn't do so well because, like, she had some sort of like mental health problems. But they all got like 5+ GCSEs. All of them got, most of them, except for the one that I spoke about, two of them didn't do any A levels. But, the rest of them that did, they all, 92% got like, high grades on their A levels, and they'd all gone on and done their degrees. And then there were 2 that went on and did their doctorates, and, they're all in well, except for one of them, they're all in kind of like professional careers. The one that didn't get his GCSEs, he is actually a business person now. So, I think he's generated, the last time I heard, I think he was making $1 million, he was close to making $1 million.
Wow.
Because he got involved in kind of like property. So he had a lot of kind of like savvy there. But so they'd all done really well. But it was interesting because their parents, a lot of them were saying that, their parents were extremely strict, and, to use Diana Bauman's model of parenting styles. So there's different ones. So there's authoritarian, where the parents are extremely strict, and then, like authoritative, where like, they're strict, but they're quite supportive, and then permissive. So, like most of the participants were saying that their parents were authoritarian, and, there was no room for maneuver in terms of like, their academic attainment, like what it was that they did. So like there was a lot of pressure to kind of move towards doing respectable careers. And I don't know if you've ever seen Gina Yashare's skit on like, how, with African parents, there's 3 careers that you can be: a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or a disappointment to the family. So like our parents were just like, these are the areas that you have to go into and stuff. But like a lot of them were just like, what, no, this is not me. I don't want to do this and stuff. So some went into graphic design, some went into IT, one went into law, teaching law, another one went into business and stuff. But, they all found their own way of doing things. And then like, the ones that had authoritative parents were a bit more, more flexible in terms of what they wanted to do. So I was just thinking of one that became a chef, for instance, because that was his, passion. And then another one went to work in the civil service. Most people just kind of followed their heart rather than what their parents expected of them. But the ones that, like who'd had particularly strict parenting, they were also reporting that, they had to kind of, because their identities were so framed around their education, they had to do a lot of kind of like undoing of that and trying to find out what other things that they wanted to do they liked doing outside of it. And then one of them was saying how he took up banger racing. So that was an extreme.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you know what's really interesting as you're describing that? Because a lot of that kind of parenting style is often written about for Asian parents. You know,
Yeah.
this idea of tiger mums and helicopter parents who keep on pushing the
Yeah.
children. And it's written extensively about Asian students, but you don't often notice that being written about African or West African students.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was probably one of the people to actually write about that. But that's what, because I mean, the thing is, I'm always a little bit wary about using typologies. But the way when I was interviewing people, there was this kind of recurring theme, and I thought that theory just kind of like matched it the most and stuff. And I think because our parents were, I think it's the same with a lot of immigrant parents, but you know, like we were literally a minority within a minority, and because a lot of our parents were students that came here and stuff, and because because of their own upbringing in Ghana and, you know, Nigeria, whatever, like in many ways they were sort of like bringing what they learned, what they experienced here to the UK. And also because, like, you know, we are a minority, as I say, we're black and everything, so it's almost like you have to work that bit harder.
Yeah.
That was their perspective. So, yeah. So I think that's why they use that approach.
Yeah. And can I ask you, you mentioned you experienced your own racism when you were in sixth form and so on. The people that you interviewed, had they all had similar experiences at some points during their education?
I mean, the people didn't talk about it in the interviews, but like it was more outside of the interviews and stuff where I mean, I remember one of them was saying, so she went to an all-girls school. There was intra-ethnic racism, and in a way this kind of like, you know, encouraged my next paper.
Yeah.
She was just saying how, like, you know, she went to school so she was born in 1963, so she went there in 1975, and she was sort of saying how she had I mean, there was a lot of like marginalization of people from African backgrounds, so she had to kind of like pretend that she wasn't African in order to fit in. And you know, because her features, well, she said that this is her description, but she was just saying that, you know, her features didn't quite fit how her peers thought that the Africans would look, which is very, very tricky in itself. Like, you know, because she was lighter skinned and everything like that, she got away with just saying that she was Jamaican. So that's what she said.
Wow. That's really interesting. It's really interesting. Yeah. Could you say a little bit more about that? What term did you use?
Intra-ethnic tensions. Yeah.
Intra-ethnic tensions, yeah. Could you say a little bit more about that? Because people may not have heard of that term before.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll speak from it. There's an issue, I would say, like, you know, with a lot of black people in the West. Okay, so for instance, in the UK, what it was there was a lot of kind of tensions between Africans and African Caribbean people. So like this is not a new thing. You know, there are some people that would say that, you know, it has its roots in slavery and you know, it's and the perception that, you know, we as Africans, we kind of sold African Caribbean people off. So that was one source of the tension. But then also when they came to the UK as well, like, you know, obviously there was a lot of racism from white people towards black people and stuff. So that was an issue. But then also when it came to resources as well, like, you know, because we literally had the crumbs off the table and everything. So there was a lot of kind of for some people, there was an infighting about that. So, you know, this intra-ethnic tension kind of resulted from that, you know, it's between groups kind of like warring for, it might be resources or recognition and everything. So, you know, that was one cause in the UK. In the US as well, there's that issue as well, because, like, you know, it's between African Americans who had been in the US for, like, obviously they were brought there from slavery, and then there's a kind of like new immigrants who sort of come over from Africa or the Caribbean and stuff like that. And, you know, that tension about who is black and what it means to be black and everything in America. And, you know, African Americans will probably say that, you know, they're probably what it means to be black. What's the word? yeah, they represent what it means to be black. Whereas, you know, like with African Caribbeans and African that have migrated over and stuff, they're just equally as black, but it's just their experiences have been different, you know, but there's tension between them for that. Again, there's tension in terms of kind of like resource allocations and, you know, the way in which they see each other, the stereotypes and stuff. Here it's the same thing. Because, you know, I'm speaking from an African perspective. I know that, you know, Africans do tend to have a lot of stereotypes about African Caribbean people, and African Caribbean people have stereotypes about us. So that's where all of this comes from, really. It's deep, and I just think that in 2020, this just really shouldn't be happening, but it's there.
You know, sorry to take it back to when I worked in Kenya, but I was really surprised when I worked there that the intra-ethnic tension was tribal. So the biggest tribe, the Kikuyus, they only really employed and worked with other Kikuyus. They wouldn't employ someone from another tribe.
Yeah. I mean, we've got that in Ghana as well, because, like, you know, I'm of Ashanti heritage, but then sometimes, you know, you hear because, you know, Ashantis, like, I'm sorry to say it, but we can be quite arrogant people. And very braggadocious, and, you know, the thing is, we will look down on other tribes like Airways, and Airways will look down on us, and, you know, Guards will look down on us, and I'm just like, we're all one people, you know what I'm saying? We're all one people. So why can't we? Okay, we speak different languages, and, like, you know, we may have sort of like different heritages, but we are one people, and can't you just respect the differences? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then this is what I think between, you know, like Africans and African Caribbean people. I think actually that's changing now. And, you know, this is one thing that I found in my research when I was doing my paper on that. You know, like, I'm seeing that with the younger generations, from our generation down and everything, I'm seeing that there is a change. People are kind of like starting to respect each other's, you know, for instance, like, you know, music is bringing people together, popular culture like Afro beats and stuff. Because at one point, you know, you would never, if you said that you liked Afro beats, you'd get laughed out of the room. But, like, you know, now it's just normal. I mean, even today I was in Starbucks and, like, they were playing, like, you know, Fela, they were playing, oh gosh, what's his name? Debanj, and I was just like, raw, you know, so it's just becoming, you know, very prevalent in society now and stuff, and everybody just kind of, you know, accepting on that. So I think it's changing.
Can I ask you something on that as well, Louise? Because this is my complete and utter ignorance on this. Would you determine that intra-ethnic tension as racism, or do you consider the word racism more white to black? If I'm being totally honest, would you consider it racist?
I mean, I think racism is more white and black because, like, obviously there's a kind of structural racism, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, which means that we can't get access to certain things and, you know, like, experience the microaggressions, all of those things. But I would say that, like, you know, it is, I don't know if we can describe it as like a kind of cultural tension and discrimination is not even the right word, but
prejudice, maybe.
Prejudice. I think there's prejudice. I think that's probably the better word to describe it and stuff. But there's definitely, you know, tension is definitely a thing. But I think racism is kind of more between black and white and black and other groups, to be honest.
Thank you. So where's your research taking you at the moment, Louise? What are you doing with your research currently?
Okay, so at the moment, in the 90s, ethnic tensions, again, like, you know, some people had very, very specific ideas about what it means to be black, and that's even, again, amongst my own people. So it's this thing about, you know, you should listen to R&B, you should listen to hip-hop, and you should dress a certain way and all this, that, and the other. And I was a real anomaly because I got into rave culture. I got into rave music in 1991. It was an accident, because my brother had been fiddling about my basically in our house, you know, my parents were a bit strict about the kind of music that we listened to, because I think they thought that, you know, like, you know, listening to anything other than high life or gospel was gonna, like, you know, take us into hell. So my brother had been fiddling about the radio and stuff like that, and I turned it on, and I think it was this group, it was called Zero B Lockup. It was a radio. Yeah, you know which one I mean. I do, yeah. Anyway, I was listening to it. I was just like, yeah, I really like this and stuff. So I left it on that station. But then obviously, you know, if I heard footsteps coming upstairs, you know, with my dad and stuff like that, the radio went off. Anyway, and then, like, I can remember me and one of my friends, two of my friends, and so sadly one of them died. But like one day we were just sitting in my room moaning about the fact that we can't go out, we can't do anything and stuff like that. And then one of them decided, okay, well, let's go to a rave. So, because it was an all-day rave and stuff like that. And we made up these really terrible plans. Like we could have got caught, but we went to the rave and stuff. And, from then on, that's when I started getting into kind of like rave and techno music and stuff like that. And then when I went to university, I became a serious junglist, right?
Yeah.
And still into my happy hardcore and everything like that. So, when I was going to these places, I was often the only black person there. So like, for instance, when I went to my first rave, I was the only black person in the tent. Like when I used to go to Limelights and stuff in 1994, I'd probably be the only black person there as well. And, I remember also going to Bagley's as well. So like there was all these different rooms and everything. Like there was the R&B room, there was a house room. I'd be in there sometimes. And then there was a rave room, and then there was just me there again.
Yeah.
And, like the thing is, it was just like, people were welcoming, but they were just kind of like, they were looking at me as if to say, are you really supposed to be here? And I'm just like, yeah, I'm raving with the rest of you. And then, but whereas, with the people that I grew up with and stuff, and my black friends and stuff, and it was just like, if they looked at my CD collection, they were just like, you need a head transplant. Like, well, no, actually I don't, because I really like this kind of music. And on Twitter, I've joined this happy hardcore group. So, I'm writing about, my experiences of that, the way, and I think it speaks to a broader issue about, again, what people think being black is about, and, these homogenous expectations. And Bell Hooks, she's, I'm drawing on her work. So she's a black feminist who's sort of like been writing from the 70s and stuff. And one of the things that she says is that through like, things like the civil rights movements and everything like that, there's a lot reinforces this homogenous idea about what it means to be black and everything. But like, actually, we need to recognize that there is diversity within our blacknesses and the way that we construct being black. And for me, I think, exactly that with my music. I like rave music still. I'm 45, I still like it. And that is not going to change. So, yeah. Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I didn't take any drugs. I'm just putting that out there right now. I didn't take any drugs, and I don't even drink alcohol. I just like the music.
I'm a similar age to you, and I was also a raver. Do you know what I found really interesting? Because the original rave was all about that kind of one love, one group. And you'll probably remember, like, the scene kind of split to happy hardcore and jungle. Yeah. And there was a racial split there as well, wasn't there? Because happy hardcore did tend to be white. And if you went to kind of like the jungle rooms in One Nation or something, they tended to be black. So that's music. There was a racial divide and identification with which side you went to.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's funny because I was reading this book. I don't know if you've read it. It's called Altered States, where it kind of talks about the rave culture, the growth of the rave culture and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was talking about exactly that. And it's I would just kind of like flip from the jungle room to the happy hardcore rooms if there was both and everything. And it's just really interesting because I was listening on my mix, my download mix and stuff like that, and it's just got everything on it. But like, I was listening to, I think there's this tune, you may know it, and it's by DJ Vibes, and it's called Sing It Loud. Oh, yeah. And it's just that kind of like for me, that was a kind of like crossover from happy hardcore, the jungle, between the happy hardcore and the jungle and stuff like that. But there was that definite split. And I think from 96 onwards and stuff, happy hardcore got really big, didn't it?
Yeah. And as I said, it did seem to have a racial split as well.
Yeah, no, it did. And exactly. So like, when I was in the happy hardcore room, because one of my friends used to DJ and stuff like that. And it was just definitely me just there, like just on it and just dancing and all this, that and the other. And the thing is, people were very welcoming, but you could see the sort of like initially, like when I'd go in the room and stuff and I'm, just wearing my, like my day glow colors and stuff like that. People were just looking at me as if to say, should she really be here? And I'm just like, yeah, I should,
I'm going to say something that sounds really, politically correct, but I remember going to an event, must have been mid-90s at Wembley Arena, and there was three rooms, a hardcore room, a jungle room, and a house room. The hardcore room was white, the jungle room was black, and the house room was gay. And
that's deep.
Yeah, and you know, I'm saying it because it was evident. I know that's kind of politically incorrect, but there was quite a distinctive difference between the three rooms.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's. I guess people will go to where they feel, where they feel they're going to fit in. But it's just really sad because, like, when you actually start looking at that, as you say, the acid house movement, that's not what it was about, was it? That really wasn't what it was about.
One Love was the original term, right?
Yeah, I know. And then you had the Summer of Love. I think it was 88 and stuff. That was what it was. But yeah, it's a shame. It's a real shame.
That's right. I mean, the original MC's chant in 88 was, any colour, any creed. That was kind of that was the chants that he used to use. So we've gone off on a massive offshoot here. I hope people listening are interested in rave music. Otherwise, they wonder what the hell we're going on about.
No, I mean, well, my paper will come out soon enough, so hopefully they'll just kind of, get a bit more interested. But yeah.
Well, I'll look forward to reading that. Definitely, as an old school raver, I definitely look forward to reading that. Yeah. Louise, can you tell the listeners a little bit more about where they can find your work and follow you?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm on Twitter. So I'm at Louise Kwarteng, by surname Kwarteng. Like my work, oh gosh, where do I even start? Because it's been in different journals. So one piece that recently came out was in higher education, and it's called studying in this England is Wahala. So Wahala is a West African pidgin word for trouble. So like this one kind of looks at the experience of West African overseas students in the UK and how they experience things. Another one that just came out in August is called Whoever Holds the Scissors Holds the Power. So that one again is just kind of looking at my experience in black hairdressers, and that's I'm sure a lot of people would be able to relate to that because you go in there, that's something that's meant to take an hour, it will take 10. Chicken runs, fights, all those kind of things. And then the one about the intra-ethnic tensions is called We All Black in It, and that one's on sociological research online. And then, my PhD is out there as well. So if anyone wants it, they can just tweet me and I'll give it to them. And then, Telling Another Story looks at the kind of positive attainment of Black students. There's a couple more, but I'm a bit like, I don't want to big myself up too much. But yeah, they're out there.
Great. Thank you for that, Louise. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for talking to me.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
If you are a regular listener to the Sociology Show, then you could help with the costs of promoting and hosting the podcast. If you can spare even a small amount, then you can donate on the GoFundMe.com website by searching for the Sociology Show. There is no obligation, of course, and all future downloads will continue to be free. A huge thank you to all those that have already donated. Your kind gesture will help to keep the show going and growing. Best wishes and keep enjoying the show.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociologyshowpodcast@gmail.com.